Syracuse began arguably its toughest stretch of the season last night, and it did not get off to a good start.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, one more thing talking about Syracuse and Clemson last night. It was not good for the Orange. They lost to the Clemson Tigers 86-72 on the road, and now we put a bow on the game, and we're going to talk about this stretch and whether or not Syracuse basketball can eke out one win during this tough time, because coming up, I'm going to tell you guys why it's important they probably steal at least one of these games when we're talking about the ACC tournament here, all right? So following the Notre Dame win, a 17-point comeback, we're all feeling a little bit good, at least for the moment, about Syracuse basketball. Not in terms of, overall grand scheme of things, but just in a vacuum. A 17-point comeback at home, it's a good feeling, right? And we all felt good about it. But Syracuse basketball had arguably its toughest stretch of the season coming up, and it began last night with the Clemson Tigers. And obviously, it really just wasn't a fair fight. Clemson was a far superior team. Don't let the final score trick you. If you didn't watch or catch the game, it was basically over at halftime. I gave Syracuse credit in the postgame for at least trying in the second half, or at least making it look somewhat competitive, but it was not that competitive. The 14-point margin does not do that game justice. Clemson was a far, far superior team than Syracuse. But when you talk about this stretch coming up, it's not easy for this team. On Saturday, they got Pitt. Pitt is currently 32nd in the net rankings, and they are on the bubble to make March Madness this season. That's a must-win game for Pitt. They cannot lose to Syracuse basketball, I really should say. Then they got the California trip. Next Wednesday, they go to Stanford, and then next Saturday at Cal. And to conclude this 5-game stretch that started last night with Clemson, they get Duke at home on February 5th. And I think we all know the outcome of Duke and Syracuse, right? I think we all know it. It's not Jim Boeheim, Coach K, from 2014 inside the Dome, where it was two of the premier programs in the country. One of them still a premier program. The other, not so much, right? I think we all know the outcome of that one. Pitt, Stanford, and Duke, they are all quad one games as of right now. And to simplify it for you guys who might not understand what a quad one game is, it's the highest level of competition. It is the toughest games to win in college basketball based on the net basketball rankings. And Cal is the quote-unquote easiest of those games, but Cal is a quad 2 game. So it's still difficult to win quad 2 games. And, oh, by the way, they beat Florida State last night at home. Remember what Florida State did to Syracuse? When Syracuse was at full strength, by the way, I might add. They were at full strength against Florida State. All 4 opponents coming up for Syracuse. And if you want to loop in Clemson, that's now 5 straight opponents. I'm not going to count the Notre Dame game. All of them in this stretch are ahead of Syracuse in the net rankings. The Orange are currently, as of this recording, and net rankings can change basically by the minute, but the Orange are currently 149, which is not very good at all. As it stands right now, Syracuse basketball is 3-5 in the ACC. That is 11th in the conference. So you might be saying, 11th in the conference, they're at least in decent shape to make the ACC tournament. Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news, I'll start off by being a little optimistic for you all. The good news is that there are plenty of teams between Syracuse and the first team out that's going to miss the ACC tournament as of right now. That team is Virginia. The bad news is that Syracuse is 3-5 in the ACC. Virginia is 2-6 in the ACC. So it's a 1-game difference between the Orange, who are currently projected to make the ACC tournament, and Virginia, who is the first team out. So it is not a big gap for the Orange, and they are in trouble. I know what I said last night, that the goal remains the same, that they have to beat these bad teams in order to make the ACC tournament. But I'll tell you on the other side of this, it's no guarantee that they win those games. And when you look at their upcoming stretch, I think they're going to have to steal at least one of these games, in my opinion. I think they do, just to give themselves a little bit of margin for error. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. But it's a tough stretch coming up for Syracuse. It started last night, didn't end up good, and hopefully they can steal at least one win. Syracuse basketball loses to Clemson 86-72. One more thing here on Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and coming up, we'll talk about some of the quote-unquote easier games after this tough stretch, but even then, it's still not a guarantee that the Orange make the ACC tournament. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively, but finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where TALKSPACE comes in. TALKSPACE, the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and more affordable. With TALKSPACE, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours. And it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, TALKSPACE is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there is a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with TalkSpace when you go to TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter promo code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's TalkSpace.com/LockedOnCollege, promo code SPACE80. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans are unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite childhood team clinch a playoff win. It's a memory I'll never forget. I'm a New York Jets fan, so I was only like 8 years old when it happened, but still, it was pretty cool to watch. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats, so you can focus on what matters, being there. I used Game Time Picks to grab tickets for an upcoming playoff game, and it couldn't have been easier. I found a super deal that gave me incredible value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view from my spot before buying. The all-in pricing is a game changer. No surprise fees at checkout, plus knowing my tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Yesterday on the post-game show, I talked about how the goal remains the same for Syracuse basketball, and that is simply beat the bad teams, and they should be able to make the ACC tournament, because right now they have 3 wins in the ACC, and with the bad teams still left to play in the conference, if they win those games and get to 6 ACC wins, that should be enough to just get them in the conference tournament. But here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. There are no auto wins for Syracuse basketball. I don't think they have earned that right to sit here and say, they're playing that team. That is a circled win for Syracuse basketball. So outside of this stretch, the 3 quote-unquote easiest games, and I say that with air quotes because, again, the Orange don't deserve any circled wins on their schedule. But if you look against teams that are bottom 3 right now in the ACC, they have 3 games remaining against those teams. They have Miami. Miami stinks, but here's the problem with that game. Miami, that's going to be a road game for Syracuse basketball. It's not an auto win there. I mean, Syracuse should be able to win that one, but it's on the road. Boston College, Syracuse is going to play them again, and it's going to be at home. But remember, the Orange had to fight back in that one. They had to come back from a 9-point deficit in the second half to beat Boston College. Granted, that was a road game. So I'm not going to sit here and say that's an automatic win because Syracuse beat them last time. And then you got Virginia at home, the final game of the regular season. Virginia's not a great team either, but I mean, that's a team that Syracuse struggles against year in and year out. It seems like they can never beat Virginia. Now, Tony Bennett's not there anymore, but still, they can never really beat Virginia. So yes, if Syracuse basketball ends up going 3-0 in that stretch against those teams, Miami, Boston College, Virginia, they get to 6 conference wins overall, that'll probably be enough because they'll be 2-0 against one of those teams in Boston College. They would have beaten Miami, and they also would have beaten Virginia. And those likely would be the 3 teams that don't make the ACC tournament this year. But hey, they're not guaranteed. So I think it's important that hopefully Syracuse can steal one of these other games in this tough stretch coming up. Duke is probably an auto loss. Pitt is probably not going to be a win either. Stanford's been surprising this season, which leaves Cal, but Cal is not going to be an easy one. Hopefully they can get one of those 4 games so that they give themselves, as I said earlier, a little bit more margin for error. Because I can see a world where in the stretch of Virginia, Boston College, Miami, Syracuse loses one of those games. And now if you're talking about 5 conference wins, well, now you might be in trouble of missing out on the conference tournament entirely. And we don't want that to happen. This is no tanking for Cooper Flagg here. That's not how it works in college basketball. So, yes, the goal is the same. Beat the bad teams. And so far to this point, Syracuse has done that in the ACC. If you look at their ACC wins, they've beaten bad teams. Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, Boston College. But those games have been close. So hopefully they can steal a game or 2 in this upcoming stretch to give themselves more margin for error. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below on that. As far as what is coming up on the podcast, we got a busy schedule today for you, ladies and gentlemen. We're not going to be talking about Syracuse basketball anymore. Don't worry. We got ACC Squad at 5 p.m. Eastern. All right, I'll put up an announcement on Twitter at LO_Syracuse for the topics of what we talked about there. Plus, Syracuse football once again missed out on a transfer portal target, Omari Evans, the wide receiver from Penn State. He committed to Washington late last night. So on that podcast, which I'm not sure right now if it'll be a full podcast or a mini podcast, regardless, I'm going to tell you guys while it's not a big deal that they missed out on Omari Evans. They're good at wide receiver. I'm not really freaked out about that, honestly. It's the fact that Syracuse in the portal has just been very, very quiet. So that's what I'm going to talk about later on as well here on Locked On Syracuse, all right? Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, you can check out Locked On ACC. I'm going to be filling in for Alex Stano today, so you can check that out with me and Kenton Gibbs. We're going to be talking about the final AP rankings. We're also going to be talking some men's hoops as well, with Louisville just being absolutely on fire and some of the other contenders in the ACC as well. We're going to bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. Yes, that means Syracuse not being one of the best teams in the ACC. And you can find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really like the podcast, hit the subscribe button. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse so this channel can grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And I will see you all later today.